you so much for coming out on this beautiful evening at the Advent of the Bird Festival. Are most of you here going to be taking on events at the Bird Festival? You're great. And how about kingfisher people? How many people have seen a kingfisher? Okay, that almost embarrasses the people who haven't. There's usually, when I give talks, there's usually like a sprinkling, and people are like, is it the size of a heron? Or but we are with a lot of good birders. So I wanted to share, before I dive into my presentation on kingfishers in my book, I wanted to share something I wrote in 2016 for Birdwatching magazine, which sadly is no longer. I've written for them for a long time, but they asked for people to write in during the takeover at Malheur, and so this is just a very short thing I wrote. I was at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge. It was at Malheur National Wildlife Refuge where I first saw sage-grouse dancing, more than 100 strong in a wondrous display on a cold sagebrush-scented dawn. Little did I know that University of Oregon field trip would be so meaningful. Later in life, I drew again upon that memory as I wrote professionally about sage-grouse, first for the National Wildlife Federation and then for the Sage-Grouse Initiative. It was also at Malheur where I first watched the antics of courting ruddy ducks, fell in love with cinnamon teal, and gasped at flights of white-faced ibis overhead. The refuge is a national treasure, an international wonder, and critical to the future of birds, both on wetlands and on sagebrush uplands. It's delicate, fragile, and not up for grabs by lawless, gun-wielding pseudo-ranchers out of state. So that was during the occupation. Then I did come back that May in 2016. I was living in La Grande at the time. I'd moved there from Missoula, and I brought my son, and you'll see him in one of the photos. At the time he was 19, and he just decided that all he wanted to do was see a bittern. We had seen one briefly, and so he was on his own quest, and there's something about that, when you really want to see a certain bird, right? So I wrote about that little trip, and at the end of that, in my blog, I have a blog I write twice a month. So if you want to read it, it's marinarichie.com. It's a nature blog. So in that one, I also want to share this. Thank you, because it's true today. Thank you to all who took action to keep Malheur National Wildlife Refuge intact, open to the public, and still resonating with birds and beauty for Ian, my son, and for generations to come. We are so very fortunate. Never take our public lands for granted, stand up to all bullies and brutes, to give ourselves fortitude, go outside, immerse deeply in what's wild, choose a bird or wild animal to follow, take deep gulps of sage-scented air and all that's blooming and blossoming. Never forget the words of Rachel Carson when it comes to introducing young people of all ages to nature, because it is Ian's generation and younger kids who will carry the torch. If a child is to keep his inborn sense of wonder, he needs the companionship of at least one adult who can share it, rediscovering with him the joy, excitement, and mystery of the world we live in. Rachel Carson. So I've been particularly inspired by her because she too won the Burroughs Medal for her book, The Sea Around Us, in 1952. So with that, I'm going to begin. And tonight we're going to focus on Belted Kingfisher as the messenger of our waterways. And I believe that by the end you will all be knowing why the kingfisher is calling us to act on behalf of our beautiful nature we share together. I'd like to begin with humble gratitude for the indigenous peoples who have known the Belted Kingfisher since time immemorial. And in fact, I learned some Salish names, some names for kingfishers in Salish, which is the in Montana, I had the great pleasure of spending a lot of time with kingfishers. You'll be hearing about them. And the Salish word I learned is shijichis. And then also I learned a few others that you can see here. So there's Sayuswa and Lower Umpqua, Tiati and Yurok, Shalel, and Kuzhanis up at the top, shijichis. And what I notice about all these indigenous names for kingfishers is they sound a little bit like water to me, like the place, like the bird. And so I think that's a beautiful way of naming. My book threads natural history with myth, with memoir, and it is a book that I now have a quote from John Burroughs that I can include that I didn't know about until I was in New York City just April 1st for this award ceremony. So I found out that he said this: "The Halcyon or Kingfisher is a good guide when you go into the woods. He will not ensure smooth water or fair weather, but he knows every stream like a book and will take you to the wildest and most unfrequented places." This is my fabulous illustrator. So if you have the book, there's 16 beautiful illustrations by Ram Papish. He was from Newport, Oregon, and has illustrated a number of books for Oregon State University Press. Very grateful to my publisher and to Ram. Since my book came out, and just 2 years ago, people have been sending me pictures, so feel free. And I love that you can take the book outside, wrinkle the cover, get it wet, and enjoy it in nature. And that picture on the top in the corner is me on the top of Stewart Peak in Missoula, Montana, and there is a section of my book about that peak and why it's so special at the headwaters of Rattlesnake Creek. Well, let's delve into the kingfisher now and just a little bit about them. And I like to put them together with a robin because they're good to compare with. As we know, a robin does not have a beak at all like a kingfisher, but this robin is particularly trying with a couple of berries to be significant. There's some things while they're about the same size, while they're about the same size, their head is much bigger on the kingfisher. They've got the crest. They have a short tail compared to a robin, and they also have tiny feet, which, if you might have noticed with kingfishers, they have really little feet, so they won't be hopping anywhere. They can perch just fine, but you'll find out later why it's handy to have specialized feet. The other thing, of course, robins flock together. They're found in your backyard. They're very social. Kingfishers are loners, territorial, solitary, anything but like a robin. Well, of course, they're famous for their fishing and their skills. You will hear more about how they can accurately catch so many fish with that headfirst dive. And sometimes even a crayfish if pitch. When the waters are muddy, sometimes kingfishers will look for other prey, or they'll just selectively take a kingfisher. This is a little bit of a photo that I wanted to share because it fits so well this one part of my book. And so I'm going to read a little excerpt. By the way, the kingfisher photos are by Charles Wheeler, and he unfortunately passed away just a few months ago. And he had beautiful photos from his blind in Potlatch, Idaho, and he generously shared them with me. So this is from my book. I saw her, a female kingfisher, perched on a fallen tree, moored in the center of the river. Her crested head was the blue of washed denim, tousled and sodden. White neck feathers formed a gleaming ring above a slate blue band that dipped to a point on her snowy chest. Below that, a rusty red belt clasped in mid-belly and draped down both flanks, partly hidden by closed wings of blue-gray hues. Only the female wears the namesake belt, and that could be meaningful. In contrast, A male shows a single bluish upper band, like a prim bandana on his white breast. In the bird world, males are almost always more colorful than females when there's a difference between the two. The rare gender reversal drew me in like the myth. You'll be hearing about the myth. Could I chase clues to this puzzle that scientists had yet to solve? A male flew in, a pinwheel of whites and thunderous blues. His flurry of notes pattered like rain. She preened her wet feathers. He landed and then lifted off, each downward wing stroke scooping the heavy air. She followed him skyward, wheeling to expose white underwings, with the reddish plumage extending to her armpits, like the work of a slapdash painter. Circling once, they descended in unison to the same driftwood that parted the currents. He looked upriver, and she swiveled her head to glance downriver. Out in the middle of the turbid Yellowstone River, the pair seemed unperturbed by the torrent. Or were they? Perhaps their hearts beat faster in each other's presence, like two people on a park bench in the rain, wildly attracted to each other. So I thought that looked kind of like that, so. They're little coy kingfishers, you know. Well, another amazing thing about kingfishers, how many people that know they nest in an earthen bank? Not as many. I didn't know that for a long time. They are not stick nests. They don't build stick nests. And those tiny feet play a really important role because they dig a long tunnel into a vertical nest bank, typically on water, by water. Now here's a question for you. I think in this room there's some birders who have been to other countries and have seen kingfishers in other places, so they know there's probably more than even on this poster. And I'm wondering if any of you would like to hazard a guess as to how many species of kingfishers there are in the world. Any takers? Throw up. What do we have? 35? 50. Higher. Be bold. Be like a kingfisher. I know what I'm serious.
75.
75. Okay, let's try that. 120. And some of that has to do with, how they're splitting more birds out. But so when I first started researching kingfishers more than a decade ago, they said there was around 90. So it's gone up. But still, it's staggeringly impressive. And many of them are radiant and colorful, and they're on every continent but Antarctica, and they are sometimes, some of them are vulnerable or endangered because of habitat loss and other reasons. So, and then also, an interesting thing, not all of them are fishing birds. Some of them are forest, sit and wait, tiny little kingfishers, but they all go head first down after something, whether it's a little salamander lizard type thing or an insect. And so they have some similarities. They all have the same qualities, the big head, dagger bills, tiny feet, burrow nesters. Some of them nest in Africa in termitariums even, so they have to excavate into it. So their nest surface may not be a bank, and some are trees, like the kookaburra, which is the largest kingfisher in the world, is the laughing kookaburra. And the smallest is the African dwarf kingfisher, the size of a hummingbird. Well, our kingfisher is Megaceral or Halcyon, and we only have our kingfisher in North America. Every now and then one sneaks across to the UK and they get very excited about it. I couldn't stop following that one for a while. And as you can see, the top orangey part is winter, summer range only, and those frozen areas, as soon as they freeze, the kingfishers have to move south. So then the purple is where you can find kingfishers year-round. The blue is the winter range, and only females migrate, and not all females migrate. So if they are going to migrate, they're females, and they can go all the way to the tip of South America. So far, our kingfishers are in pretty good shape, though like all birds, we have fewer than we did before. So something we want to consider taking care of our waterways. I wanted to also show that in my book I have a scene, this is actually in the introduction of my book, that kingfishers in Oregon are nesting on the coast. And right, you can see them, this is in Coos Bay. So you can find kingfisher nest holes and kingfishers in saltwater too. So something to look out for. Well, I'm going to move ahead to where the heart of my book takes place, in Missoula, Montana. And I was at this time in my life when I was looking for a bird to write about, really. I had been a nature writer for a long time. I lived several decades, actually, in Missoula. I had been in Oregon, gone to University of Oregon, spent a number of time there, got my master's degree in journalism in Missoula, and stayed for a long time. So I thought I knew the area well, but I knew I hadn't spent the kind of time I wanted to in my home creek. So the journey centers on Rattlesnake Creek for 7 seasons, but includes some other parts as well. So this is a map of the Rattlesnake. Oh, I can try my little thing. Okay. So look, so Rattlesnake Creek flows down for the Rattlesnake National Recreation Area, wilderness, and then it goes down to this valley. I lived right in here. The kingfishers were kind of up in this area that I ended up following. And then it goes right down into Missoula, the Clark Fork River, the university. So that's where a lot of my story takes place. And this is one of the beautiful illustrations by Ron Popish. So how did I end up choosing the kingfisher? Well, I'm going to read from chapter 1. Leaning over the balcony railing of the second-story bedroom, I listened to the surge of Rattlesnake Creek flooding 2 blocks away. Close by, a yellow warbler sang the morning into buttery sweetness. Robins caroled, magpies squawked, but the ringing staccato of the bird I longed to hear would never mingle with backyard birds. Instead, the belted kingfisher would be pelting downstream on strong wings, always looking for fish. Minutes earlier, I'd read the dictionary word of the day, which you have on the screen, and I was floored that a kingfisher and halcyon are the same thing. It's a noun, and I love this idea, both of a mythical bird and that a kingfisher could be associated with happiness, with peace and tranquility, which seemed a little bit odd, too, when you think about kingfishers. They're quite predatory, but you also think about where they live, too. So I, right away, wanted to find out more about the myth. So as I write, tracing the Halcyon definition to an ancient Greek myth, I read of 2 lovers, Halcyon and Ceyx, transformed by the gods Zeus and Hera into kingfishers destined to nest annually over the winter solstice. Then Aeolus, god of the winds, father of Halcyon, would calm the rough waves for 14 days, 7 on either side of the solstice. Sailors called the interlude the Halcyon days, bracketed by storms. Well, since a child, I've always had a dream of being a bird. And so this is me, actually, at age 8 with my brother, my older brother, and when we lived in Mount Rainier National Park. And my father was the assistant superintendent there for a couple years, so very influential on who I became as a nature person, naturalist, writer, environmentalist. But yes, I had a thing about birds and transformation for a long time. And so, of course, I became interested in this book in finding out the indigenous myths of kingfishers and transformation and whether there was a connection, or just all indigenous myths of the belted kingfisher. So this is what I want to share with you. Without the help of the kingfisher, the Arikara people of the Great Plains would not have found a better world. To journey westward from a hiding place underground after the Creator sent floodwaters to eliminate giants, 3 birds helped them overcome obstacles to reach a better place. a kingfisher, an owl, and a loon. Coming to a chasm, Kingfisher reshaped the earth and laid down an enormous beak that served as a bridge. With a great flapping of wings, Owl cleared a thorny forest, and fast-flying Loon parted a lake. The people could choose whether to continue or turn into the bird that helped them. A kingfisher might be tempted. By the way, who knows what the owl is? Great gray, yes. Lovely bird owl that we have in Oregon and in Montana. Well, I would need all the help I could get, it turns out, from the kingfisher and anything else, because I was so naive when I went in thinking, I'm going to learn all about kingfishers and find a nesting pair. And then I'm like, oh, no, you aren't. Not very easily. They're elusive and skittish and wary and a photographer's nemesis for a good reason. So have any of you had struggles with kingfisher photography? They don't like to stay still, do they? Always vanishing around the next bed. Well, in my first season of finding a nesting pair, losing them, finding the hole, not finding the hole, looking for them, this is a scene from the book. I wanted to point out, now I know how to use this great thing. These are all nest holes along the top of this bank. This is Rattlesnake Creek. And this turned out to be what I call the Kingfisher Mansion of nest holes. But only one, like there's a hole, was going to be the active nest hole. And this bank actually goes quite a ways farther. So this is a little scene when I was having to just sit and wait and be frustrated, but enjoy the time. And my good friend Sandra came along and spent a few days with me watching and looking. Scents of wild onion buffed the air, furled maple leaves dusted the sky. A wild turkey promenaded past us, his hot pink wattle flashing like an orchid in the jungle depths. The first mosquito of the season bit Sandra's forehead, not total bliss. So, and there were a lot of times when I was watching kingfishers starting in late March, going in through June, where in Montana, which is probably a little like Burns, it can go from beautiful one day to snowing and blizzarding on you the next, and you still got to be out there. Well, eventually, not to spoiler alert here, but there would be no book otherwise, I did find a really great active nest hole. And this is from the book. A female kingfisher docked on an immense boulder protruding from the far side of the creek. She bore a silvery minnow held lengthwise within her beak. Rattling once, she cranked upward and into the perfect nest hole, the one I had missed all along. The round hole showed the telltale 2 furrow marks at the base. You can see those little here. If you could see that, there'd be 2 of them. That's a good sign of an active nest. And this, the nest was about 2 feet down from the top of the bank and only 4 feet up from the creek. Well, whenever a kingfisher sleeted into view, I was on high alert. It was so exciting when I first found the kingfishers. But guess what? They were on high alert too, and they did not want me there. And no matter how hard I hid behind alders. I tried to be really quiet. So I got a camouflage blind. Found this blind from Cabela's. It's a turkey hunting blind. It's perfect for watching. And I was on the other side of the creek and in the alders, but I was still a little close. So as I say here, this is kind of funny. The world had changed from within the blind. On one hand, it felt confining. On the other, I was like Harry Potter wearing his cloak of invisibility. Brits have a different term for blinds. They call them hides, and I could see the advantage of both names. I wanted the bird to be blind to my presence as I hid like a child in a game of hide and seek. Well, this is what happened at first. Bang, a dipper clanged on into the front screen. I ducked as if someone had thrown a dirt clod. The groggy bird staggered to his feet and lurched into the air. The dipper's world had changed too. So you put up a blind, things start flying into it until they figure it out. But anyway, so I spent a lot of time in this blind, and I had some time there too to just be meditative and quiet. And throughout this book, I'm both grieving and finding a way to connect with my dad, who had died of cancer at age 70, just a few years earlier. And this is a photo of him with my son when my son was 5. And of course, he had his binoculars, and he was an incredible birder and influence in my life. So when I was at the blind, as I write here, I've got the quote up there, I thought of him. Certain things would remind me of my dad. He loved thrushes. So, as I say here, when a Swainson's thrush landed within grasp and opened his beak to sing, I nodded to yet another sign of my bird-loving father's presence, as if we could still revel in the soloist poet of the wafting, spiraling away verse. In the company of creekside inhabitants, sorrows and losses cascaded into the clear waters where bull trout finned upstream to spawn. Well, eventually, the exciting moment came after all the watching. And this is actually one of the first kingfisher chicks that poked his head out from that first year. So there he is, seeing the world for the first time. And I love that image, don't you, of like these chicks, and there can be 5 to 7 in there in the hole. They've been deep in the dark, way back in this tunnel, but they hear the creek, right? And then all of a sudden they're looking out, and it's this beautiful, brilliant world. And it's something that, I think it's like that sense of wonder thing, right? Like every day, if we can remember to look at the world that way, I think about that kingfisher. However, once they're out, the parents will feed the kingfishers for about a week. And then it's kind of like, you got to figure this out. And one of the things they have to figure out, and this little guy is doing a great job because he's looking up, because danger often comes from overhead. That's the goshawk. Cooper's hawks, goshawks are the big predators for young kingfishers particularly, but any kingfisher. And I have not seen this, but a number of people have told me, and maybe one of you has too, watched a kingfisher elude a Cooper's hawk. They will dive. It's the only time they dive under the water. Because kingfishers, if you notice, when they dive, they will just barely hit the surface. But they will actually submerge and up if there's a Cooper's hawk. So keep your eye out. Has anyone seen that? No. It's sometimes the audiences have. So the big thing, too, a young kingfisher has to learn is all the techniques that go with being a kingfisher in flight. You know, the strong wings and the diving. That's an incredible skill, because you have to it's that whole trust the fall thing, right? And a kingfisher has to enter the water without a splash, and they have to be so smooth and aerodynamic and keep their eyes on the prize and catch a fish. So, this is where I wanted to say this part. Well, all I will say is that when I watched young kingfishers learning the technique, they were hilarious. There was belly flops, crash landings, really excited, and they got a pine needle. So they don't get it right away, but they have to. They have to learn this fabulous head first dive. And if you read my book, I'll go into all kinds of things about the dive and the double phobia in the eyes, but they do have incredible vision, for one thing. They have red oil droplets that help with the refraction in the water, and they have far more cones than we do, so they see color really well, and a number of things that help them as they take that very fast dive into the water. And of course, there's the art of the hover. How many of you have seen a kingfisher hover? Yeah, that's a cool thing they can do. Not so, some few birds can do it, but it takes incredible neck strength, muscular neck, because they're hovering because they want to decide if they're going to dive after the fish, right? So they have to keep their head completely rock steady, and yet their tail's moving, their bodies, everything's moving but their head. And then they can dive. And yes, there it is, the kingfisher fishing. I keep blocking your view, don't I? I'm going to try to move. But we got to stay in the camera.
Yeah,
so,
I know.
But I want to show that on this part, that splash is coming back up out of the water, and that the wing, they have to hit their wings on the water. And to do that, you know, it's kind of like, think about a swimmer and they're doing their flip turn in the pool, but they don't get to push off the wall. They only push off the water. So it's an incredibly difficult thing. I interviewed a flight specialist who said it's one of the coolest things that kingfishers do is that upward lift they get. And of course they flip their fish around so that they can swallow it head first so the scales won't be the wrong way. And you can tell this one, she's going to feed this one to a young chick. See, she's got it the other way. Well, I got very interested in this red belt mystery that I talked about in the beginning. Like, why is the kingfisher female more colorful than the male? And nobody seemed to know. So one thing I decided to do was, in the time of year when I wasn't out looking during the nesting season, to take some trips and to find out some things from the closest relatives. So over here we have ring kingfishers, which are quite a bit bigger, half again bigger, than crow-sized, and they live on the lower Rio Grande. And they are, I thought, well, maybe I can learn something. So there's a chapter in there, a book about them. And then I had an opportunity to go to the Smithsonian and the bird hall in the background. You can go in there and get a visitor's pass and pull out drawer upon drawer of stuffed, you know, taxidermy kingfisher study skins and look at all the belts. And so it's like, are they big or are they, you know, what's the difference? And could that mean something like in the field? So say maybe a female kingfisher, if she had a flashier big belt, she might drive away a kingfisher who has a smaller belt. You know, so many things to explore. And then this is my good excuse too, go to South Africa. There's a chapter in my book about the giant kingfisher, because that's another relative of the belted kingfisher. It's amazing how far apart those are. But then I would return back to Rattlesnake Creek after time away, and I wanted to give big kudos to these two people, Lisa and Paul Hendricks. They are naturalists who live in Missoula, good friends of mine. So since I have left Missoula and have been in Oregon the last few years, they keep watching the kingfishers and report in, and I go back and visit. And they were part, when they could, you know, Lisa was a teacher and he's a zoologist, so they would drop in and help me out in the blind and, you know, answer. Sometimes it definitely helps to have more than one person. And it also helped to spend several seasons out there. If I could have written a book maybe after one season. I saw the nesting hole, I learned a lot, but no, it's like I was just getting going. You know, I was so curious. And some things I got to see a lot more in the next seasons, like mating, which is a very quick thing, does not take long, and digging a nest hole, which was just like this, all this dirt, they're kicking it out with those little feet, and the toes of a kingfisher, all of them in the Carassiformes order, have a fuse. One of the toes is fused to the other part way. And so it provides a little shovel. So, you know, it helps. Oh, let me go back to this. This is also something in the book you'll read about. Lisa and Paul and I made a citizen science discovery where we saw kingfishers doing nest building activities that had never been recorded before. Instead of like just landing on a, you know, wall, a stream bank, and finding a little way to hold on somewhere, a little ledge or a twig, and then beginning their hole. These kingfish, this pair, this one year, and by the way, they're seasonally monogamous, so not always the same pair. So this one year, these birds decided they would do something called aerial ramming, and they would take turns from about here to the wall, and they would just fly as fast as they could and just slam into the wall and just fall back like that, but they were accurate, they were making a hole. And after 3 mornings of this concussive activity, they finally got a hole big enough to hold on to and started working it over. And then they moved and didn't use the nest hole. But it's published. We have a published finding in the Wilson Journal of Ornithology. So it's my encouragement to you that anyone, I am not, a PhD scientist, but if you look long enough and you observe things, you can find something new and exciting and publish it. And we also got carried away, and Lisa and I and Paul crossed the creek after the kingfishers were gone, and we excavated. We just dug down. We put a measuring tape, and we figured out the hole was 4.5 feet back, 2 feet down, and we just dug down, and we were able to check out the burrow. And the reason I have a weird, funny little expression is because I was smelling the dirt in the back of the hole, and it's like a lot of uric acid smell. It's like rotten eggs. So in my little zeal as a writer, I put some in a baggie and I took them home, to keep. I don't know why. but I will say the interesting thing is that the nest isn't messy because the young kingfishers have different chemistry than the adults, so they're able to digest the bones, and then so there's no messy bones in there. And then this is what happens when the adults' chemistry kicks in, is they have a pellet. So they regurgitate that pellet, they cast a pellet. So if you're lucky, you might see that. Well, besides just being fascinated by kingfishers, when you're out long enough anywhere, wherever you are, on and out here, and you just spend enough time, you become very connected to all kinds of other animals, and they can walk by you when you're quiet. You see things you've never thought. So these are some of my favorites out there: a beaver bear, little white-tailed fawn, chipmunk. Some of my favorite birds that were on Rattlesnake Creek. We've got cedar waxwing, right? Oh, people can just call them out. What's that? Dipper. Yes. Excellent. It's so great talking to a bunch of birders. And one time, I had an incredible experience with a mink. And I was sitting on the edge of the creek, really just enjoying a late afternoon, liking being there, and I was in my shorts on, and a mink just ran right over my bare legs. Feel that chocolate fur, and it's like, okay, this is what it feels like to be one with the wild neighborhood. Oh, and I have to say, that is a beautiful creek picture. That's Rattlesnake Creek, if you ever see it in Missoula. It has the most incredible palette of stones. And I talk some geology in the book. So, but after all those years, I did end up deciding, my son graduated from college, from high school, and I was free, and I thought, I'm going to travel in my pop-up camper, which I'm in tonight with my husband, Wes, who's here, and but anyway, I was on my own, I was single, and I traveled for a whole year in my camper, and I decided I really wanted to move back to Oregon. So I landed in Oregon first, and then to Bend. And this is a picture from that trip I mentioned when my son was 19, when he came to the Mal here in May in the 2016. He was really excited about seeing a bittern. I've got to catch up with where I am in my script. I got so excited. But there's something I wanted to read to you. Oh no, we're good. Okay. So I thought I would mention just at this point some spots to see kingfishers while you're out here, and I've been gathering them from people. I've seen a kingfisher near Hay Springs Campground. I got some nice tips from people that you can see them on 205 going south to the refuge on a wire. You might see a kingfisher there. And I've listed Buena Vista Ponds, French Glen, Barnes Spring. And Teresa Wicks with the Bird Alliance of Oregon told me that at Barnes Springs there were 3 of them in the post-breeding. So she thought they might be young of the year. So they're out there. How many of you seen kingfishers on Malheur Refuge? A few. Okay, well, we better see some on the list after the next few days, right? They're harder here, I know, but they're out there. Like that. That's one of the potential spots. And I wanted to point out some things you might think about when you're looking at kingfishers in the wild, is how they fly, their wing patterns. They often seem to be scooping down low with their wings, like that, and then they can pull them tight. And this kingfisher is just kind of cruising along, and that means it's just not very, there's a fish, and it's caught the fish, and just kind of going along. But if this kingfisher was in a hurry, chasing another kingfisher, then that head would be aerodynamic and flat like a jet plane. A few other ways you might see a kingfisher: head on, diving off a branch. And you might wonder how big a fish a kingfisher can catch. This is a Rocky Mountain whitefish. My friend Ken Miracle over in Boise took this photo, and this one was too big. So maybe 6 inches is starting to get a little big. That photo just came. I was back in North Carolina giving a presentation and met this wonderful woman who took that photo. And this is part. I'm almost ended, almost done here. And I'd like to read sort of this idea when we think about the kingfisher as a messenger of our wild waters. I'm reading a little bit from the last chapter and reminding us of the myth of the Arikara. The kingfisher of the Arikara origin story laid a great beak across a canyon for people to cross to a better world. Today, the mythical beak invites us to traverse from despair to hope and from passivity to action on behalf of nature that is us. Like people harmed by terrible injustices and healing only with tender support, the natural world has a way of renewing given a chance. Free a pine from barbed wire cutting deep into the bark, come back to see the vibrant new needles. Clear the way of invasive plants, and in the soil lie native seeds waiting to sprout. Close ditches that diverted life-giving waters into suburban lawns, and the stricken creeks will again brim with insects and fish. Take down artificial dams with care and restore beavers to their natural keystone role of creating pools, and watch them store water, nurture fish, and attract my favorite bird. We can't restore extinct species, we can't bring back centuries-old forests after logging, and we can't give up. My esteemed conservationist friend Brock Evans often rallies the younger generation to embrace, quote, hopeless lost causes, unquote, and points to the victories of wilderness, wild rivers, protecting ancient forests, and endangered species. He likes to share a favorite quote he adapted from architect Daniel Burnham: "Dream only large dreams, for they have the power to fire people's souls." Our waterways give, and we must give back. Our wilderness-fed streams and rivers are essential. These are the waters that can best weather the climate chaos if we honor their rights to flow clean, clear, cold, flooding, and free to merge with wetlands and intact forests, which store carbon, exhale oxygen, and sustain life. Every native bird, animal, and flower interweaves within a community of cooperation. When it comes to belted kingfishers, their trilling, consonant-rich calls above waterways send a message the Salish people have known since time immemorial. Water is life. Treat wild waters as you would an elder. Listen to their wisdom. Honor the complex web of riparian plants and forests, vital to shading, cooling, and nourishing thousands of species converging on these living ribbons of lush green. And by the way, this watercolor by Robin Cohen is part of an exhibit that I am working with her, as we are both artists in residence for the Greater Hills Canyon Council, and we have an opening show of our Refugia project at the World Birds of Prey Center May 2nd, coming right up. So then it will be up for into mid-July. And so she's got 33 beautiful paintings, including, of course, this kingfisher, and I have written prose and poetry to go with them. So if you get over to Boise, it'll be there. Well, before I end, I thought I'd turn this to you for a moment. I'd like you to think of a stretch of water, any kind of water that's familiar to you, your time maybe when you become one with the wild, watery neighborhood. And just go there for just a few seconds. Halcyon. Oh, that was the Metolius, by the way. The kingfisher is my compass, still my compass, my way of finding true north and alert to that awakening call. And what a great bird. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the belted kingfisher, where the female is more colorful than the male. Maybe she's the queen fisher, and all, indeed. And a bird that just knows, the sky and the water and the deep earth burrow, and is a provider and takes care of their young. And there's so much to love about the kingfisher, and I think they can teach us the ways we can best protect the places we love. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's time for question. Isabel, what do you think? Yeah.
Do they use the same hole twice, or they have to drill a new one every year?
Do they use the same hole twice, or do they have to dig a new one every year? Great question. Sometimes they use the same hole twice. They'll remodel. Sometimes they build a new one, and you never know which one they're going to do. And sometimes they do a lot of false holes, and then maybe they go back to the one that they remodel. They're tricky.
How long does it take to build a nest?
It takes about 4 days maybe. Depends on how deep they have to go. But they have to keep working on it, yeah. And they take breaks. But it's a lot of work for them, yeah. And the burrow is about the size of a football in the back. And think about I think the record is 10 feet long for a kingfisher nest tunnel. It's amazing. Yeah. I'll wait a second.
In terms of their foraging area, how far do they forage from the nest? And what I'm thinking is, I've watched them hunt, but have always wondered how far away they are from the nest.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So the question is how far away do they forage from a nest? Which also reminds me, how far away they are from each other. So I always reminds me, what I did not cover. So they. Depending on how many fish there are and how abundant the resources are, they will share a tighter area if there's plentiful fish. But they are territorial, so typically there's like a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles apart even between kingfishers. But then the key thing, the treasured piece of real estate, is the nest bank. And there's a lot of places where you can't find them. So sometimes they even will nest away. They'll find, they've even been known to nest like in a gravel pit and be half a mile from water. So that's not their favorite, their first choice. But anyway, they, in terms of how far they would go from the nest to feed their young, they will try to go not far at all if they don't have to. And they had a beautiful spot where I watched on the creek, because sometimes I could see them just go, it's like this, they'd like, catch a fish, up in the hole, catch a fish, up in the hole, you know. They had it down and around there, but, you know, I think sometimes they do have to go quite a bit farther, and sometimes it depends on what the water's doing and whether it's muddy, you know, and they'll cross over to another, you know, if there's like just a little ridge between another waterway. So we still, the thing about kingfishers is they're not that well studied, and it's not surprising because they're hard to study. So, and the studies that have been done about kingfishers tend to have something to do with mercury poisoning, because there's always a human health reason that you get funding. And even in those studies, they can't really determine whether kingfishers are negatively affected, partly because of what you said, like they'll forage away, or, you know, did they get this fish from this part? But as we know, mercury can't be good for anything, so, but we could use a lot more studies about kingfishers. Question in the back, I think, was there?
Why such a long tunnel to where why so?
Well, why such a long tunnel? Well, it's safe. You know, just think, in fact, kingfishers have a really good nesting success. You know, think how much harder it is having a stick nest. You know, you've got cats, you've got ravens, you've got whatever's going to get after you've got cowbirds laying your egg, you know. But if you're nesting deep inside a hole, you know, so the things they have to worry about are snakes. Sometimes a snake could get into a hole, or mink if they could, you know, reach it. But most of the time, they're pretty safe. Maybe the biggest thing they have to worry about is flooding. So, you know, they can flood. And some of these climate extremes, I'm starting to worry, because we get these huge extreme floods, and it could be wiping out kingfisher nest holes. Question?
I think it's because all our predators are claustrophobic.
All our predators are claustrophobic. That could be.
There's
Yes.
also a thermoregulatory
Oh,
habit to
you are
them.
absolutely right. You sound like you're a biologist. Yes, it is a thermoregulatory. Yeah, think about it. They have such a wonderful, you know, it moderates the temperature, you know, so in the ground. And in fact, there has been a study of some wintering kingfishers, and they use those nest holes on cold nights in the winter. It makes sense because they're getting the nice thermal regulation there. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Nancy.
When looking for a kingfisher nest, you mentioned the divots that are on the outside. And are there any other indicators or any other imposters that we might mistake for a kingfisher dwelling?
Well, you know, one place to look for them is bank swallow nest colonies, but their holes are a lot smaller, and they dig them. But so if you see like a larger tennis ball sized hole in that nest colony, that's, you know, somewhere to look. They're the ones that are active. The furrow's a really good way. You can also look to see if you really can see, well, is there a stick in there, or spider webs, or something that makes it look like they haven't been in and out. They kind of can look a little ragged after they haven't been used. But yeah, so I think those furrow marks, because coming in and out, are the best. Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. I'm going to go over here. I love all these questions.
You mentioned that you were attracted to kingfishers because the female was brighter than the male, but what first drew you through them? There's so many wonderful birds. I don't know how you were able to choose one.
Well, you know, it's interesting. Well, there are a couple things. You know, one, I really like the idea of a bird that would draw me to my home creek, because I live like about a half block away. But I really got intrigued seriously by the word halcyon. And I was like, oh, mythic bird, cool, you know, and I really wanted to track down that idea. And in the beginning, I actually thought about, well, you know, how can a kingfisher lead you to a state of wonder? And then I was like, nah, that's not really what this book is about. I just want to like honor the kingfisher, find out everything I can. And in the process, you know, I did find the meaning of halcyon days. And this, yes.
So you've given your heart to the kingfisher for probably many years now. So as a writer, when you consider perhaps your next project, how do you go from that kind of passion over one thing to considering something else? What might consider if you do?
Well, yeah, I appreciate that question. It's like the next book. And I don't think I can replicate that kind of adventure years that I had. It was a special time in my life, really. But what I can do is evoke that feeling of what it is and remind myself, when you go out and immerse, and whether it's kind of that slow birding kind of thing. But I have been, I've got a couple book projects in the works, and one has to do with, that is different though. It's looking more at connecting a place that I love, places that I love, which are ancient forests, wherever, big trees, ancient forests with birds, in a way that I don't think. So some of it is like, where do I want to spend my time? And also, what am I concerned about that my voice could make a difference? Like, I truly want to speak up to help protect our endangered wildlife and habitats and places, and in a way that might be different, that could reach people as a writer, and as so yes, we're thinking forests and birds, and birds taking us into 3-dimensional levels, but suites of birds, so not just one, but because there's way too many birds to love. Yes, true. So I know that doesn't really fit with being out here in Malheur where there's not trees, but I also love this landscape. Thank you for that question. Well, I really appreciate you all, and I will be here. The books are for sale. I do take credit cards, and I've got plenty, so they're $25. And I also have a few of these, handful of these children's books that I wrote, which are a bargain at $8. Bug feeds and bird feeds of Montana. However, we've decided every bird and every bug is here. So thank you so much, and please come up and say hi.